Chapter 8. The Chase. Separate Ways, Reminiscing. The gloomy, overcast day shed an eerie light above the small town of Solstice. Few people wandered about for fear that a storm may be brewing to the west. The darkened clouds loomed low over the land, poised as if they were about to strike at those who dared to look. Signs began disappearing from the windows, and shutters were being secured on a few of the buildings, as most were preparing to close shop early for the day. A young woman stood alone in front of a small shop at the end of the town. She tried to keep her sweeping from becoming a hopeless venture as the wind continued to whip along the ground. Pausing, she stopped what she was doing and glanced down the dreary dirt road. Business had been slow for her father this week, as only a few customers stopped by for actual purchases and repairs. Many would just come in to browse the selection of shoes they had to offer. Being the only cobbler in the land, her father made a good living with the shoes and boots he made in the back of his shop. His craftsmanship was incredible, having spent most of his younger single years learning from the Europeans who would traverse the Atlantic over to the New World to get a fresh start with their lives. He would round up the finest materials from the local farmers and tanners, only taking those parts that endured best under the duress of the people's feet. The woman smiled to herself. She enjoyed seeing how happy people became when they would find a pair of shoes that fit just right. "Brianna!" called a voice from inside the shop. Brianna blinked, the voice snapping her out of the momentary daydream. She turned around to address the figure just inside the doorway. "Yes, father?" "Better finish up your sweeping, dear. Storms are brewing," called the older man. Brianna gave him a smile that would extinguish the gloomiest part of anyone's day. He was older than most people with daughters who were in their early 20s. The scattered patch of white hair on his head was frayed and muddled. His work clothes were worn down to almost paper-thin in some spots. The patches on the work apron he wore were beginning to come off again. Brianna had lost count of the times she had fixed them. Some days she had wished that he would spend more time on his appearance than he did on other people's feet. She giggled at the playful sentiment. "Yes, father, I'll be right in," she replied. The older man smiled as he turned back and disappeared into the small shop. Brianna tried to continue her happy demeanour, but it soon faded. Ever since her mother died years ago, she had turned away from any higher learning to help her father with his business. She was very happy to help him and take care of the house the way her mother used to. She could see it in his eyes sometimes, though. Not often. There would be a sadness that stared back at her. Brianna never questioned her father's feelings, and could not tell if he was proud of her for staying with him, or saddened that she remained, obligating herself to stay and take care of him. Her own feelings would wash over her, leaving her thoughts a mess, and making it hard to concentrate on anything other than doing what she needed to. To Brianna, the only thing that mattered was helping her father. A rumble roared off in the distance, bringing Brianna's thoughts back to her task at hand. Her eyes drifted up to the foreboding sky, the gloom of the day wearing down upon her. She looked down at the pile of leaves that she had made. A gust of wind swept through the street, scattering the leaves about the storefront again. Brianna gasped, and then let out a sigh as her inner feelings told her to leave it for tomorrow. Putting her broom to the side, Brianna glanced about for anything else that she could fix or clean before retiring for the evening. A sudden commotion echoed through the wind from down the street. Glancing up, Brianna noticed a gang of people running up to each building, knocking on the doors, asking questions. It appeared as if each answer they received pointed them further down the road, leading them toward her father's shop. The strangeness of it did little to keep her attention. Brianna gathered her cloak around her arms and prepared to go back into the building. A whirl of cloth and hair erupted in front of her. Brianna yelped, caught unaware by what happened. Someone had run into her, sending them both tumbling to the ground. Brianna landed on her hip, wincing from the numbing shock of hitting the solid surface. The stranger braced herself before landing on top of her, bringing their faces close together. Their eyes locked for a second. Brianna's head grew light as she was looking into the eyes of someone she knew of long ago. Her hair was still long and stringy, falling over her eyes, which flamed of emeralds in the dim-lit sky. The fearful eyes stared at her, not focusing at all. They were very wide, the pupils mere dots amidst their centres. Brianna grabbed the woman by the arms, but she swung about like an untamed animal. The woman jumped, trying to break Brianna's grip, but she was weak and gave little strength to her efforts. "Uriah, please, it's me," said Brianna, trying to settle the person down. "Remember? Brianna!" Uriah continued to glare at her with rapid breath. She slowed her struggles, and after a second, her eyes softened. The anger on her face loosened to a sorrowful frown. Uriah's lips quivered, her whole body now catching up with what had happened. She threw her arms around Brianna and began to cry. Brianna hugged her as tight as her arms would let her. She did not know what to say or what to do for that matter, but her instincts told her to try and comfort her as best she could. There was more shouting coming from down the street. Brianna watched the mob of people who were now just a few buildings away. They were looking for someone. Brianna withdrew her hold on Uriah, glancing over her body, wondering if she was all right. That's when she noticed it. That's when she saw the blood. The front of Uriah's tattered olive dress was stained with blood and caked with dirt. Brianna shuddered from the sight. But her instinct caught her once again, acting before she had more time to think. Picking herself off the ground, she pulled Uriah up and led her into the shoe store. Slamming the door behind them, Brianna locked it and then turned to address her begotten friend. "Uriah," she breathed, surprise enveloping her voice. "What happened? Are you all right?" Uriah's arms began to shake. She brought her hands to her face as the tears were still streaking from her eyes. Brianna put her hands on Uriah's shoulders, trying to keep her focused. Uriah's eyes lifted up to meet hers. Brianna saw the look of fear reflecting back at her, but there was something else. She could have sworn they were also laced with the smallest touch of relief. It was as if the burden of enslavement had been lifted from her shoulders, and freedom had enshrined itself amidst the greens of her eyes. Brianna began to feel the sense of understanding for what happened to her, reading Uriah's face like an open book. This was not her blood. Uriah's head tilted to the side, wondering if her long-time friend could truly understand what had happened, what had been happening to her this whole time. I just got tired," her voice shook out. Uriah tried to control herself enough to tell her story. "I was tired of the yelling, tired of the beatings. I was just so tired." She broke down again, unable to finish. Brianna grabbed her and pulled her into her arms. It was the only thing she could do for someone who had been through so much in such a short life. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's all over now. It's all over. You have nothing to fear anymore. You are free." Uriah sniffed, feeling safer now than she ever had in her life, feeling that for the first time ever, someone cared about her. A fist pounded on the front door, shaking the walls of the shop. The two girls jumped from the instant shock it gave them. Uriah shook with each thunderous knock, knowing what lay for her on the other side of the door. Her eyes grew wide, her fears growing even more so. The end was near. She could feel it. They had come to punish her for her crimes. "What's going on here?" asked a voice from behind the far counter. Brianna turned to look at her father, who was watching the two of them. His face writhed with confusion. "Who is that, Brianna?" Her father approached the door, his body motion letting everyone know what he was about to do. "Father, please don't open it," she pleaded to him in a sharp hush. Brianna's father looked at the two in shock as he began to notice the bloody grit on Uriah's dress. Before he could say anything, another pounding knock sounded at the door, followed by a harsh voice.
"Open the door before we break it down," growled the voice. "We have confirmed that a suspected criminal may be in your building. Now let us in." Brianna held on to Uriah as tight as she could as her fears of what may happen began to stab at her chest. Brianna's father turned to the door and then looked back at them. "Both of you, out the back," he told them. "I'll stall them as long as I can." Brianna's lips began to quiver as she reached out a hand and gripped his arm. "Thank you," she whispered. "You've got a lot of explaining to do when you return now," he told her. Brianna nodded to him thankfully as she and Uriah left for the back room. One last barrage of knocks shook everything inside the shop. After a quick breath to relax his nerves, Brianna's father unlocked the door, opening it up just enough to peer out. A large hand thrust the door wide open, forcing him to step back. Several young men filed through the door as they ran inside to search the shop. Heavy footsteps followed after them as the sheriff entered last. The sheriff was a tall, opposing man, towering over the deputies around him. His eyes remained hidden behind the small circular glasses that he wore. Even in the dull-lit confines of the shoe shop, they reflected everything around, hiding his gaze from all who dared to look. Brianna's father tried his best to keep cool under the awesome presence of the town's authority. "Evening, Sheriff," he said, before regretting it. The sheriff turned his steel-cold, reflective stare back at him. "Evening, Royan," he replied. "It's been reported that a young woman entered your shop a few minutes ago. Have you seen anyone?" Royan shook his head. "No, just my daughter," he replied. "I suppose that is what they saw." The sheriff nodded, but Royan could tell he was watching him like a hawk would watch a field mouse. After a few seconds, one of the deputies came back to report. "Sir, there are 2 women running through the fields toward the forest. Should we follow?" The sheriff scowled at him. "Yes, you fool," he harshly replied. "Tell the others to mount up the horses. We'll catch them before they hit the forest." The young man nodded before disappearing through the open doorway. The sheriff turned back to Royan, his brow furrowing behind his rims. "That better be a hostage she has," he warned him. Royan nodded in nervous agreement. "Aye," he replied. "I suppose it is." The sheriff turned, exiting the store. Royan covered his mouth as the reality of the situation was now coming to grips with his mind. "Please, Lord," he prayed aloud, "please watch over my daughter." A wave of dreadful anxiety fell over him, fearful of what the outcome could be. The 2 women ran through the fields as fast as they could. Brianna's throat began to burn from the intensity of the pace. She had never run so fast in her life. Uriah led the way as they approached the edge of the forest. Turning around, she could see off in the distance many figures racing toward them at a pace faster than they could run. She looked to the forest again. They were close. They could run in there and hide. No one would find them the farther they went. They could do it. They could run away, live off the land and be free. Free from the touch of evil that could never do them harm again. Brianna bent over. Her lungs just could not catch up to her body. But Uriah could not wait as she tried to press urgency upon her. "Come on, Bree," she told her. "We can make it. We're almost there." Brianna stared at her, not knowing what to think. "Where will we go?" she asked her, panting between words. "Uriah, they can't hold you responsible for killing someone in self-defense." Uriah turned, her eyes engulfed with rage. Brianna could have sworn she saw a flame flicker deep within those eyes. "This is not about self-defense," Uriah bitterly retorted. "This is about my life or theirs. This is about protecting what little I have in this God-forsaken world. They may not have cared for my father's fate, but for the deputy I thought I could trust." Uriah quivered in place,
Grief and betrayal washed over her face as she looked to the sky for some kind of reprieve. Brianna's heart seized as the words of her friend's deadly confession washed over her. "Then why?" she pleaded. "Why not just run? Why did you have to kill when you could have left?" Uriah approached her friend, the harsh feelings filling her hungry soul. "Because they would still be alive," she yelled hoarsely. "I couldn't let them live. I couldn't let them do to another what they did to me." Her eyes flared with desperation before she turned her head to try to hide herself from Brianna's gaze. "I'm so sorry, Uriah," Brianna replied, her eyes cringing in remorse. Uriah shook her head in disgust as she stepped to the side. "I thought maybe you would understand," she shouted, her voice low, growling like a wild animal that had been backed into a corner. "But that is my fault. I should have realized that no one would understand. The sheriff didn't care or even listen when I would tell him what had been going on. Why should he even try to understand why I took my father's life? How could any of them know? How could they understand what I've been through? My whole life." The two stared at each other. Uriah could sense that maybe Brianna did know and did understand, even though it had been years since they had even seen each other. Regardless of what had led them apart, she was still there for her when she needed her the most. Before either could break the silence between them, something caught their attention. Brianna flinched as she heard voices and hoarse shrills cry out from far behind them. She turned to look as the sheriff and his men were racing toward them at full gallop. Brianna's heart tightened as she was now faced with a dire dilemma. Behind her, Uriah was also watching the approaching posse. Everything started to slow before their eyes as panic took hold of what would feel like the final moments of their lives. Shots rang out as the bullets whizzed past Uriah's head. The two instinctively ducked from the sound. Uriah tried to distance herself from Brianna, but Brianna continued to follow her. Uriah cursed the foolish girl for her actions, knowing what they would do to the both of them. Reaching out, Uriah grasped Brianna's hand as they ran for the woods. They were almost there. They were almost free. They could make it before the horses would get them. Another shot crackled through the air. Brianna's arm tugged away. Uriah stopped, turning around to see what had happened. Brianna fell to her knees, her eyes losing their focus on what was going on around them. A red stain appeared around the front of her light-coloured dress. Brianna looked down, her hands clutching at the wound in her torso. Uriah screamed as she ran back to her friend. Brianna's lips were moving, but Uriah could not hear what she was saying. The approaching hooves came to a halt around them as Uriah turned to see the first deputy dismount. Without hesitation, Uriah ran to him just as he was about to fire his rifle. The loud crack of the gunpowder sent Uriah's ears into a fit of ringing. Her left shoulder whipped back as searing pain ran down her side, leaving her arm numb. She screamed a bloody rage, not wanting to feel the pain, but a desire, the desire to defend the one who lay upon the ground. Uriah stared down the gunman as she began to notice fear claiming his eyes. He seemed surprised that she was still standing after being shot. The gunman raised his rifle once again, but Uriah quickly reacted as she reached behind her back, pulling out the knife she had hidden in her dress. Lightning arced across the sky, flashing upon the bloody blade. With a scream of rage, Uriah lunged at him with the knife, hitting the deputy in the shoulder. He shuddered, stunned by the shock of what had happened. The knife was wedged deep as he stumbled backward, falling to the ground, his hands clutching desperately at the knife. Another shot. Uriah's other shoulder flew back. The sting of pain was tremendous as her other arm dropped, leaving her defenseless. Her dulled gaze fell to the rest of the deputies now surrounding her. She staggered back as the numbing sensation in her head shifted around like an emotional pinwheel. The feelings of rage were giving way to hopelessness, giving her the sense of loss of what she had finally claimed. Another shot caught her in the abdomen. Her body flew backward, falling to the ground, hitting something soft as she did. Uriah tried to breathe, the short gasps making her stomach painfully clench with each raspy breath. With all her strength, she turned around, looking at the person she was laying on. Brianna was staring straight up into the sky. Her breath was also shallow and quick. Uriah choked out a cry as she tried to raise a shaking hand to her friend's face. Tears streamed down the sides of Brianna's eyes, her gaze drifting to the form before her. "I'm sorry," Uriah spoke, her voice weak. "I'm so sorry." Brianna nodded, her shaking hand clasping Uriah's. They both cried for their misfortunes, for a world that did not understand, and for a world that showed them no justice. Brianna stared fearfully, trying to stay focused as Uriah slumped over, her last breath escaping her. As she did, Brianna gasped, panic-stricken, realizing what was happening. The terror of the moment made her fearful of what they might do to her as well. "Please don't kill me," she kept thinking over and over. "Please don't kill me." She tried to look away from the sight of her friend, hoping that someone would come and take her away from this waking nightmare. As her breathing slowed, her eyes grew wider as if becoming aware of something. As if for the first time in her life, they were truly open as she stared up into the cloudy sky. A light formed far overhead. The skies opened up, revealing a bright blue hue beyond the barrier of black and grey. A beautiful aperture of radiance spread apart above her. Her breath slowed even more, her eyes relaxing as the sight above eased the worry from her soul. The pain began to subside. Relief came to her as gradual as a leaf on a brook. Warmth spread to her cheeks, as if a summer wind had gusted upon her weary body. Wave after wave, the air pulsed against her, growing in strength with each passing second. There was nothing left to fear as the weight of the world began to lift from her shoulders. Her body was light and adrift. Her mind was at peace. Her eyes grew sleepy, and with each beat of the wind, it became harder to keep them open. But she had to try. She wanted to see what was happening, if only for a few seconds more. Light shadows drifted to and fro as one in particular began to approach her. It reached out a hand to her, gently pulling her off the ground. Her body floated with ease toward the blurred outline of the figure. Two arms pulled her in, wrapping themselves around her in a loving embrace. She was safe, secure, like a child being held and protected by an adoring mother. Brianna felt no ill intent with the arms that held her. They had come for her. They had come to take her home. The rush of air pressed upon her face once again, its warmth surrounding her, bidding her to rest. Nothing else in life had ever made her feel so good, so content. It drained all of the fear and worry from her body, leaving her spirit feeling enlightened and serene. She was happy to go wherever the loving arms would take her, and, as far as she knew, they were heading up to the patch of blue sky above. A sound began to tickle the insides of her ears. It was vague at first, but with each beat of the wind, it drew closer and more distinct. It was the sound of singing, coming from somewhere above. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. No other voice that she remembered could sing with such delicate devotion. The sound travelled through her mind, ignoring the strange language and accepting the pure beauty for what it was. The wind continued to beat at her side, its rhythm relaxing her mind to the point of drifting away to dreamland. The last thing she remembered seeing was something rather unexpected, yet now she knew where the wind was coming from. Big, bright, beautiful white wings flapped along, pushing the air behind them to soar up higher toward the ever-approaching blue hue. The scene slipped from her sight, her mind and body releasing the last of their mortal energies back to the place they originated from. Settling into the comfort of arms, Brianna fell asleep with a smile imprinted upon her peaceful face. Uriah lifted her head. There before her stood the sheriff and his men,
surrounding her as if she would rise again to put up another struggle. She was weak, but anger still burned within her soul. "You may have taken my honour, you may have taken my body," she warned them, her arms straining to pushing herself up off of the ground. "But you will never take me." The men continued to stare, her harsh words not even fazing them. The sheriff's glasses reflected the scene, leaving his eyes hidden behind their sordid sanctuary. Uriah hesitated, praying that one of them might be foolish enough to try and take her away, but they did not move. They did not even bother to look at her directly, as their gazes were directed toward the ground. "What are we going to do with them?" asked one of the younger deputies. Uriah eyed him, sneering at the boy who pined over her through most of their school years. He stood next to the sheriff, looking smug for the deed that was done. The sheriff did not move. His form remained rigid. It appeared as if he just wanted to look a little longer at the sight before him, his mind concocting several plans before settling on one in particular. The rain began to fall, steadily increasing as the sheriff shifted his stance. "The whore we can get rid of," he finally spoke. "It's unfortunate for the other one that she got involved." He looked over to the bloody knife on the ground. "Make it look like she killed her with the knife. No one will notice." "Yes, sir," replied the deputy. The sheriff glanced at the dirty young woman on the ground, her lifeless body posed in a horrific form. But something else caught his sight as he turned his head, appearing to look directly at Uriah. Uriah flinched, feeling as if he could tell she was there. "Should have done what I told you to do," he said to her in a low tone. "Should have just walked away. But you just had to push it. You just had to kill your father. I could understand that. But Joe? He did nothing to you. At least, nothing you didn't deserve. It's a shame. You were his favourite too. Funny thing is, unlike you, he's going to make it. Now you make your bed with the devil, girl. He's coming for you. Burn in hell." And with that, he turned and walked away. Uriah was frozen, unable to comprehend what was said, let alone what the men were doing to the bodies on the ground. She watched in horror as the numbing reality of it all began to fill her with an icy cold dread. Am I dead? Is Brianna dead as well? Her insides began to shake. She convulsed. All of her anger, all of her hate swelled within, back to where it was before she killed the man who beat her life away. Raising her hands to the sky, Uriah let out a blood-curdling scream. Everything she despised in life came blaring out, shaking the earth around her feet. Black clouds swirled overhead as the rain began to fall harder, pelting down upon the land. Uriah stared at the men and beyond to where the small town lay off in the distance. "I damn you all," she bellowed, spit and water spewing from her lips. "All of you will perish among the forgotten, for I will never rest until this place is dead." Her eyes began to flicker with a flame as her form convulsed with a newfound energy. The clouds continued to swirl overhead, growing darker and more violent. Flashes of lightning arced through the sky as deafening thunder shook the land. A dark shadow formed from behind, rising up from the ground, leeching at her, draining her excess energy away. For a moment, the hate and anger were gone. She began to feel vulnerable, alone and afraid. Every horrid thought, every painful memory came crashing over her, as if she were about to relive her dreadful life over again. The overbearing presence she felt from behind made her fearful for what she was about to do, as Uriah slowly turned around to look. A large swirling shadow stood before her, its form shifting in contrast to the winds of the surrounding storm. A pair of red flaming eyes appeared out of the shadow, searing Uriah's soul, piercing the very heart of her existence. A body followed them as it emerged from the shrouding mist, showing unto the world the true appearance of a demon.
It was a man. His face was haggard, his dark hair long and unkempt. The skin upon his body was greyish in colour, rough and faded like worn-out leather. A dark hue encircled his body, revealing the power that was contained within his condemned soul. The darkened robe he wore was tattered, as if he had worn it to every point on the earth since its creation. His spindled body was in contrast to the tight muscles that lined each limb. The look he imposed was one of foul intent, as his gaze captured the figure standing before him. Uriah began to shake. She fell to her knees, waiting for what was to be the inevitable. All of her worst fears began to take form, giving her that familiar feeling of lonesome helplessness. "Please," she whimpered in defence. The demon raised his hand, striking it across her face. The smack echoed through the air as the demon growled in anger, the sound shaking Uriah's withered being. "Never beg of me again," he warned. His voice was low and full of gravel. "I will make all your desires come true, but you must pledge your services to me, lest you want to live in pain and torture till the stars fall out of the sky." Uriah shook her head, pleading to the beast before her as she had no other choice. "I will do what you ask," she spoke in defeat. The demon reared his head back, laughing at her pledge of exile. Uriah cried as she bowed her head. Any form of freedom and redemption from a failed life had all but left her grace of consciousness. She had to do it. She had to embrace the path laid before her. "Good. Now come, you have much to learn," snarled the demon. Uriah watched in fearful awe as large black wings sprouted from behind his back. She cowered back in fear, but knew it was too late to turn back now. Reaching out, the demon forcefully grabbed her by the shoulder as Uriah winced from the intense grip. With a mighty surge, the demon pushed her down, driving her toward the muddied dirt below. But the impact never came. The ground gave way to a dark, eerie tunnel that led straight down toward a speck of dim light far below. The walls began to speed past them, their fall growing faster by the second. But Uriah did not notice. All she could focus on was what awaited them in the far distance. She held her breath, daring herself not to look at the insufferable light that was drawing her closer to her final destination. Brianna sat upright, staring straight ahead. A tear trickled down her right cheek. She had been reflecting on the horrible parts of her past, unsure of why they had come to her all of a sudden. If she could forget some of what had happened to her up until now, she would have gladly done so. Such painful memories were not what she was accustomed to, but they were part of the outline that defined her life. How she had made it through it all was beyond her comprehension at this time, but how she came out for the better was all she could think about. That line of thought brought her attention to the person next to her as Brianna turned to her longtime friend. Uriah had more than her share of painful memories, most of which she had relayed to Brianna at one point or another. There were times when Brianna had to struggle with the former demon to reveal most of the painful events that surrounded her life. Even though it made Brianna feel bad and even sometimes made her cry, she was thankful that Uriah had shared these painful memories. It gave her hope that it would in turn relieve Uriah of her pent-up aggression. Yet the one thing she never revealed, and Brianna was grateful for it, were the details pertaining to her life in hell. Brianna knew she could not bear to hear of the things that happened there. Her mind would shut down at the mere mention of what may be down there, as it were. All she could focus on was how strong Uriah was to overcome such a life, turning back to the path of light. But just what kept Uriah going through it all, she never understood, for that was something that even Uriah could not understand. There was so much to admire about her, it made Brianna feel foolish for even trying to exude the kind of courage she had. She was stronger than Brianna was, more brave and headstrong than she felt she would ever be. There were other parts to her, though, the rough, untrusting side she portrayed to everyone else, which did not gain her many friends. Some of their peers had questioned Brianna about her connection to the former demon. Why they were friends, or how they remained friends, were thoughts that never crossed Brianna's mind. She gave her friendship to Uriah without hesitation, without question, and without knowing the consequences of what would happen beyond the mortal life. For who would? There was such a strong urgency on Brianna's part for Uriah to be there, and something deep down told her that Uriah felt the same way. She would not be here if it were otherwise, she told herself. Yet something deep inside Brianna had to know. She just had to ask her. She turned to address Uriah. Her friend was by her side, watching various events throughout the cosmos, pretending to, at least, take an interest in what was going on. "I hope this isn't too boring for you," she teased. Uriah shot her a side glance as Brianna noticed her eyes changing to an enlightened hazel. "Oh, I wouldn't worry too much about what I'm doing over here," she replied. "Thanks," Brianna giggled, knowing that small talk was not her best approach. Her heart usually led her voice, and now it was starting to take over. "Uriah," she began, "I've been meaning to ask you something." Uriah glanced over again, her face somewhat concerned for what Brianna would ask. "What? Don't tell me you're still upset about the meeting." Brianna shook her head. "No," she replied, turning her gaze away. "I've been meaning to ask you about, well," she hesitated before lifting her head. "Are you happy?" Uriah pulled her head back, her eyes turning teal, marking her surprise. "Now that's a loaded question," she tried to play off. "I'm serious," pleaded Brianna. "Please, I would like to know." Uriah shook her head. In all her life, she had never known anyone to take such an interest in her well-being before. It drove Uriah nuts at how thoughtful Brianna was, even toward her. More often than not, Uriah would just get up and walk away when Brianna would start to cry or express any feelings of sympathy or extreme kindness to her. Uriah did not care much for that. It wasn't as if she thought it was a sign of weakness or a showing of lesser character than she carried. She admired Brianna for her ability to care, but Uriah could never see herself returning the favour. She just didn't know how. "It seems as if I've spent a good deal of my life finding a place where I belong," started Uriah. She let out a heavy sigh, her eyes misting over to a sea blue. "As a child, no one accepted me for who I was, an innocent. When I grew up, no one accepted me for who I was, a survivor. Even in the depths of the abyss, no one thought I could cut it as a hellion. I guess they were right." Uriah bowed her head. This was harder than she imagined. She had never opened herself up as much to anyone other than Brianna. But if it were not for the constant harping of questions like these, she would not have told anybody. At least, anyone who appeared to take an interest. And as far as she was concerned, no one did. "After all of that, how can you not feel happy for where you are?" Uriah glared at her before turning away, her eyes closing to a huff of irritation. Her mind wrestled with the notion that Brianna still did not understand what was going on. "I thought that of all the places that would embrace me for who I was, it would be here," chided Uriah, her lips tightening. "After all, this is heaven, isn't it? This is the land of salvation, is it not?" Her voice rose with each word she stressed. Brianna stared at her with alarming eyes, not realizing what she was saying. "Uriah, I don't understand." "Oh, please, don't tell me you don't notice," Uriah countered. "Everyone looks to you as if you were the prime example of what a perfect little angel should be. Have you ever noticed how they look at me? Have you ever known what it is like to be looked down upon, as if you shouldn't even exist?" Brianna shook her head. She brought her hands to its sides, not knowing what to think. Her vision blurred. She did not want to admit it, but she did notice. She just hoped that with her around, it wouldn't have mattered. Uriah withdrew her rage. It just wasn't worth the time to feel angry about it anymore. "If you don't like what you hear, then you shouldn't ask such questions," she muttered. Yet before she could even think about fleeing the conversation, a hand touched her shoulder. Uriah flinched from the contact as she turned to look into the eyes of caring loyalty. Brianna's eyes glistened, but they did not show sympathy or pity, and that's what surprised Uriah the most. "If it makes you feel better," Brianna said, "I am honored that you are here. You are among those who love you and are happy with your presence. And if you cannot see that, then keep looking at those whom you think don't care, for that is all you will ever see." Uriah's throat tightened. She had expected to make Brianna cry. She was prepared to leave if she got too over-emotional for her taste, but that didn't happen this time. This was not the Brianna that she had come to know all her life. This was someone else. This was someone who emitted love and compassion, yet knowledge and wisdom as well. Uriah felt small in comparison to her, belittled by the fact that it was she who did not understand herself. At least Brianna tried. Uriah had a lot to learn if she was going to keep her status among the heavens, which was something that had never crossed her mind until now. "I'm sorry," she told her. "I'm sorry that you've had to go through so much so soon because of me. I led you away from a happy life and turned yours into something that maybe you would have eventually become, but all too soon. It's not fair for either of us to have gone through so much. But now, to answer your question, yes, I am happy. Happy to be here, to be your friend, and to be a part of all of this." Brianna's heart leapt as her face could not hide her inner feelings. Uriah gave a half smile. It wasn't something she was good at, but it was a start. Brianna reached over and gave her friend a hug, and for the first time, though she seldom admitted it, Uriah accepted the embrace. "Isn't this touching?" muttered a voice from the side. The two women looked up to see the blazing red eyes deep within the universe. Darkness had returned. "Well, look who's back," Uriah spat with distaste. "What do you want, demon?" The eyes flared away as it cast its gaze across the universal image. It magnified thousands of times before revealing the scene to them. "Your hero is about to become one with the cosmos," it cackled with glee. "Oh, I'm afraid he does not stand a chance against what I have in store." The eyes faded once more. Uriah quickly stood up. Worry covered her expression as she saw what was approaching Brianna's hero. "Oh no," she whispered, pointing to the cloud of shadows that was moving swift and silent. "What are they?" "Shadow demons," replied Uriah. "Stealth assassins." She shook her head as the direness of the situation began weighing upon her. She knew what they were capable of and realized that Brianna's hero was defenseless. Clenching her fist, Uriah prepared to dive into the universe, but before she could fall, a hand gripped her arm once again. Uriah curiously turned to Brianna. "Wait," Brianna said, her eyes lighting up. "I have an idea."